At approximately 3:50 in the morning on April 18, 2016, the hallways of Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, Texas, were completely empty. Outside, rain had fallen over the quiet North Texas community, and the early morning was still hours away from daylight. Inside the church, however, an unidentified figure was already moving through the dark corridors. Security cameras captured the person dressed from head to toe in dark, police-style tactical clothing. The individual wore a helmet, a heavy protective vest, gloves, and other equipment that made the person look remarkably similar to someone preparing for a SWAT operation. The face was concealed, making identification almost impossible. In one hand, the person appeared to carry a hammer or similar tool. For nearly half an hour, the mysterious figure wandered through the church. The person moved slowly from room to room, opening doors and examining different areas of the building. At several points, glass was broken and doors appeared to have been forced open. Yet the person did not behave like an ordinary burglar rushing through a building looking for valuables. Instead, the figure seemed to move deliberately, spending considerable time inside the church. The most recognizable feature was the person's unusual walk. The feet appeared to turn outward, while the movement of the legs and hips created a distinctive gait that investigators later hoped members of the public might recognize. The person captured on the cameras has never been conclusively identified. Although internet users frequently refer to the suspect as a man or sometimes even as a former police or SWAT officer, neither claim has been established as fact. The clothing looked like police tactical equipment, and the word police appeared on the back, but there is no evidence proving that the person was actually a police officer. Investigators have described the suspect as an unidentified individual whose sex could not be determined from the footage. The surveillance images showed only a heavily disguised figure moving through the church. While this strange intruder was still inside the building, 45-year-old Terri Bevers, known to her family and friends as Missy, was preparing to begin her day. Bevers was a mother of 3 and a fitness instructor who regularly taught Camp Gladiator workouts. On that particular morning, she was scheduled to lead an early fitness class at Creekside Church. Because of the rainy weather, the workout had been moved indoors. There was nothing about the morning that suggested she was walking into danger. Bevers arrived at the church parking lot at approximately 4:16 a.m. and entered the building around 4:20. This is an important detail because many versions of the story circulating online incorrectly claim that the mysterious figure first entered the church at 4:18 a.m. In reality, the suspect had already appeared on the church's surveillance cameras at approximately 3:50 a.m. By the time Bevers arrived, the unknown person had apparently been inside for roughly 25 to 30 minutes. Bevers entered the church expecting to prepare for her fitness class. She had no reason to believe that another person was hiding somewhere inside. The surveillance cameras, however, continued recording the unidentified figure as the two occupied the same building. What happened during the next few minutes remains one of the most important unanswered questions in the entire investigation. At some point after Bevers entered the church, she was attacked. The exact circumstances surrounding the attack have never been fully revealed to the public. Investigators later determined that she had suffered multiple puncture wounds to the head and chest. Her injuries were fatal. Shortly before 5 a.m., people began arriving at the church for the fitness class. Instead of finding their instructor preparing for the workout, one of the participants discovered Bevers unresponsive inside the building. Emergency services were called, and police officers quickly arrived at the church. Investigators searched the building to determine whether the attacker was still inside, but the mysterious figure had disappeared. Whoever had been moving through the corridors before Bevers arrived was gone. The building became a crime scene, and investigators began trying to reconstruct what had happened during the early morning hours. Fortunately, the church had extensive surveillance cameras. The footage became one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. It showed the unidentified person moving through the building before the murder. Investigators could see the tactical clothing, helmet, gloves, protective vest, and the object that appeared to be a hammer. They could also see the unusual way the person walked. The footage provided investigators with something extremely valuable, a visual record of a person who appeared to have been inside the church shortly before the murder. But the footage also created an extraordinary problem. The person's face was never clearly visible. The helmet and other equipment concealed the individual's identity, while the clothing changed the apparent shape of the body. Investigators could not confidently determine the suspect's sex, and even the person's exact physical characteristics were difficult to establish. The unusual gait quickly became one of the most discussed aspects of the case. The figure appeared to walk with the feet turned outward and with an unusual movement through the legs. Some observers described it as a limp, while others believed it was simply the natural walking style of the person wearing the bulky protective equipment. Investigators nevertheless considered the gait potentially significant because someone who knew the suspect might recognize it. The surveillance footage was eventually released to the public, and the case attracted enormous attention. People watched the videos repeatedly, attempting to identify the person from the way they walked, the equipment they wore, or the way they moved their arms and legs. Online investigators enlarged frames, compared walking patterns, examined the tactical clothing, and searched for people who might own similar equipment. But despite the enormous public interest, none of these efforts produced a confirmed identification. One of the biggest questions investigators faced was the motive. Was the person inside the church simply committing a burglary, or was Bevers deliberately targeted? At first, investigators considered the possibility that the suspect had entered the church intending to burglarize it and that Bevers unexpectedly encountered the intruder. There was evidence of forced entry and property damage, which supported the possibility of a burglary. However, the suspect's behavior raised questions. A conventional burglar would generally want to enter quickly, take valuables, and leave before being detected. The person captured on the cameras appeared to spend a significant amount of time walking through the building. Doors were opened, glass was broken, and different parts of the church were explored. The strange clothing and deliberate movement made the situation even more difficult to understand. If the murder was planned specifically against Bevers, another question immediately followed. How did the killer know she would be there? Her fitness class was scheduled for the early morning, but determining whether someone knew her routine, monitored her activities, or simply encountered her by chance has never been publicly established. Another important clue emerged from surveillance footage in the surrounding area. Investigators examined vehicles that had been seen near the church and other locations during the relevant time period. One vehicle of interest was described as a light-colored 2010 to 2012 Nissan Altima sedan with a small oval bumper sticker beneath the license plate. Investigators hoped that someone might recognize the vehicle and provide information about its driver or owner. However, being a vehicle of interest does not mean that the person associated with it was the murderer. This distinction is important because the case has generated enormous amounts of speculation. Over the years, numerous individuals, vehicles, physical characteristics, and theories have been discussed online. Some produced useful tips for investigators, while others were simply incorrect. The internet effectively created a second investigation surrounding the official investigation. Thousands of people became amateur detectives. Some focused on the suspect's unusual gait. Others concentrated on the tactical equipment. Some tried to determine whether the person was male or female based on body proportions. Others attempted to identify the manufacturer of the helmet or vest. There were even attempts to compare the suspect's walking style with people appearing in unrelated videos. The problem with this kind of online investigation is that speculation can easily become confused with evidence. A person may look similar to the suspect without having any connection to the crime. Someone may have a similar gait without knowing anything about the murder. A vehicle may resemble the one seen near the church without having been involved. Investigators therefore had to separate genuine information from the enormous volume of theories generated online. Despite the years that have passed, the central mystery remains remarkably simple. Someone entered Creekside Church before dawn. That person wore police-style tactical clothing and concealed their face. The individual moved through the church for approximately half an hour, apparently damaging property and opening doors. Missy Bevers arrived while the person was still inside. Bevers was subsequently attacked and killed. The suspect disappeared, leaving behind surveillance footage but no confirmed identity. The case is particularly disturbing because investigators have something that many unsolved murder cases do not have: video of the suspected killer. Yet the footage has not been enough to reveal who the person actually was. The suspect's face remains hidden, and the clothing makes physical identification extremely difficult. Over the years, investigators have continued receiving tips. Some have been investigated and eliminated. Others have required additional examination. The case has remained active, and authorities have continued to seek information that could identify the person responsible for Bevers' death. The passage of time has not erased the evidence. The surveillance footage still exists. The images of the mysterious figure walking through the church remain available. The unusual gait remains one of the most recognizable clues. The vehicle information remains part of the investigative history. And the unanswered questions remain. Was the intruder there to steal something? Was the church deliberately chosen? Did the killer know Missy Bevers personally? Was her arrival unexpected, or had the attacker been waiting for her? Why wear police-style tactical clothing? Why conceal the face so thoroughly? And perhaps most importantly, why has nobody definitively recognized the person despite the footage being viewed millions of times? There is no verified answer to any of those questions. What can be established is that this was not merely an internet horror story. The murder of Terri Missy Bevers was real. The surveillance footage was real. The mysterious figure was real. The tactical clothing was real. The unusual gait was real. And the investigation remains unresolved. The most important correction to the viral version of the story is the timeline. The suspect did not first appear at 4:18 a.m. The person was already inside the church by approximately 3:50 a.m. Bevers arrived around 4:16 to 4:20 a.m., meaning the mysterious figure had already been inside the building for a considerable period before she entered. That detail makes the case even more disturbing. Before Missy Bevers arrived that morning, an unknown person was already walking through the darkened church. The cameras silently recorded every movement. The figure had no face that investigators could identify, only a helmet, tactical equipment, a strange gait, and what appeared to be a hammer. Then Missy walked through the doors. Less than an hour later, she was dead. The person captured on the cameras was gone. And more than a decade later, the question remains the same. Who was the person beneath the helmet? The footage has survived. The investigation has survived. Missy's memory has survived. But the identity of the person who walked through those empty church corridors before dawn on April 18, 2016, remains one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries.